You have a dog hair on you. You big dog guy. You a big cat guy.
That's probably from me.
Yeah. Let's track it in.
We were wrestling earlier.
Yeah.
You can go ahead and open us up.
Me?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. We'll do. All right. Well, welcome to episode 3. And here we are, Derek. This show format is going to be a touch different. We're going to be breaking down one of our old projects or projects from the archive, as you will. Kind of going through it, telling some fun stories, some backstories of how it came to be, some of the trials, tribulations, fun things, bad things, things we had to overcome, etc.
Yeah, and I would say this project was really our first large project, I would say.
It made us who we are today.
Yes, and it's kind of like, to some degree, for me, I know, feels a bit like macaroni art. Like, like when I look back at it now.
Like, do you like it?
Like, so there's a slight, I feel like we've come a long way, but it's still definitely, we still get a lot of comments about it and compliments. And I think the bones and the,
not as many comments as my ice fishing video, though.
Yes. Did you put a GoPro down there? But I think the authenticity of the spot still comes through. And clearly it was good enough to eventually be turned into a national commercial. We talked about it, I think, on last episode a bit.
Episode 2.
But yeah, we're just gonna be doing a breakdown, sharing some stories, challenges, creative solutions that we faced, sort of, how it evolved into what it evolved into, because even the scope, like we changed the project scope on it. And so, yeah, we're definitely excited to, for you guys to see the spot. It was, like I mentioned, really one of our first brand films. We had done other stuff prior, but first brand film for a brand that had some weight. So
this is called The STIHL Way.
Yes.
And the quick and dirty backstory is a client came to us. They wanted to have a factory updated tour video, kind of like how it's made. Again, we kind of touched on this in the last episode and more in depth, but kind of started out with, hey, we just want to do a factory tour update. That way, anytime we bring people through the factory and they stop and they look at the TVs, it's like an update of like what this section of the factory does and what that section of the factory does. And we said, cool, we can do that. And we basically took that project and took it upon ourselves to say, let's take a chance here. Let's put together a brand film, take a shot. If they hate it, cool, they can throw it right back. If not, if they love it, awesome. We also knew that we could always go back and do a factory tour video. So it's never like we just, took the budget and ran and just kind of did what they didn't ask for. We knew that we were shooting for both. We could shoot and do the ask that was there for that client, but also potentially deliver them a brand video that they would like. And fortunately enough, long story long, they loved it. And this ended up turning in from a internal factory tour video to a national commercial that, was on ESPN during Timber Sports, ESPN The Ocho.
ESPN The Ocho.
And ran for quite some time there. And so, very, very fun, exciting, a lot of sweat equity, a lot of things that we'll kind of dive into on how we kind of made this thing happen. So,
yeah. Well, let's take a look at the video and then we'll talk about it after.
Cool.
A new day begins. To pick up where we left off. To face the challenges ahead. To provide for our families. To put our best foot forward. This is the STIHL Way. The way of the road less traveled. The way of hard work and ingenuity.
Still, this is John.
The way of diligence and persistence. The way of grit and perseverance. This is the way Andreas STIHL invented the first electric chainsaw in 1926. The STIHL family name has always stood for innovation and quality. And over 90 years later, not much has changed. STIHL is the #1 selling brand of chainsaws in the world. And at the heart of every engine is a crankshaft reaching 16,000 revolutions per minute, the same speed as a Formula One race car. More than enough to get the job done. STIHL Incorporated, located in Virginia Beach, Virginia, manufactures most of the steel products sold in the United States, helping to make steel #1 in America. Our accessories department is a factory within a factory, producing trimmer heads, tubes, gas tanks, and enough trimmer line to go from here to the moon. Raw metals are heated at temperatures reaching 1,800 degrees and transformed for precision parts. Our pistons are machined with dimensional tolerances of only 4 microns, 10 times thinner than a human hair. And our industry-leading technology maintains the quality of each piston. Getting perfectly shaped components is made possible because STIHL is one of the largest captured technical injection molders in America. Most of the polymer components are manufactured by STIHL, and this vertical integration enables STIHL to control and ensure the quality of every product before it ships. Our assembly lines are highly engineered and automated continuous systems for producing thousands of steel products per day, running around the clock to keep up with the demand. STIHL retails products through a network of more than 9,000 servicing dealers in America, ensuring that our customers receive the service and quality that it takes to make our products worthy of the STIHL name. These are the people uplifting the standard, forging the path, facing the challenges, and looking ahead towards each day. This is the STIHL way. German engineered, built in America, believing in America.
All right. Well, that was the STIHL Way brand film. It was later cut down into a 60 and a 30, but that was the main one. And yeah, it feels a bit of a time capsule watching that. A lot of memories come back from what was a very long shoot and a very long post-production process.
Yeah, what do you think? How many days do you think that was?
I always say 10 in my head,
Probably
but it
was
might
10.
have been more,
Yeah.
honestly.
And that was like spread out over probably 2 months.
Yeah.
And then post-production was probably a good amount of time as well.
Post-production was months.
Yeah.
But I would say 5 days in the factory, I remember, and then I think 5 to 7 days. And again, this is not including scouts and things like that. Like there was just a lot of like we're figuring this out as we go. We always knew like we could pull it off. Like there was never a doubt from that standpoint, but it was all still very like fresh. Like, all right, we gotta, because at that time it was just me and you. This was 2015, so almost 8 years ago at this point. And we knew that we needed to be like shooting and directing and handling producing. At this time, we didn't have a producer that we had worked with yet,
right.
And we were producing most of the stuff, but we knew like, hey, this is out of our wheelhouse. So we brought in a producer, and then
just a locations producer.
Yeah,
not even like a
You're right.
ground producer. It was just, hey, here's some contacts of a barn. Here's some contacts of this. I think we only used maybe 1 or 2 of the actual locations to produce.
Yeah, you're right. We did produce. We just didn't have a producer on set other than us.
Right.
Which again, we would never do on a shoot this size.
But even the producing was just the locations.
Correct.
Yeah, we communicated with all crew. We handled all billing, all of the producing stuff. Meals,
I know.
everything.
I stand corrected.
Yes.
I stand corrected in the flagship canon history of things.
But this was, that makes a good point. Like, this is the first time we probably had worked with like a a full crew, like art director, talent, G&E. Like we certainly, this was the first project of us handling all of that stuff. We've certainly been a part of other productions where another agency was hiring an art director and so on and so forth. But this was definitely new territory for us.
We had been a part of projects of this scale, but we had never done anything all under our umbrella and being the ones responsible for executing and staffing and making all those roles at this point. Now we've done this countless times. But so all of that was that was where the hard part was, because it's like, it's you're figuring this out, and it's like, can I trust this producer? Can I trust this production designer? Can I trust hair and makeup? Can I trust like X, Y, and Z across the board?
Yeah, and I think a good point is, like, again, this is a very for what we were making it into be, it was a very shoestring budget. For what the client was asking, it wasn't. But for what we were trying to make, it was a shoestring budget. And nowadays, if we were going to try to do this and not pull a bunch of favors, which we'll get into, like we did on this project, it would have been triple or quadruple the price for sure, budget wise. But that being said, all of our crew, all of our talent, it was a lot of other people similar to us, like still kind of just getting in the industry, trying to make a name for themselves on the come up. Our G&E crew was like, just kind of getting in, just similar, like out of film school, a lot of our talent was friends and family.
Which is still something that we do to this day because it's so great. Like, our lead, I would say he's like the lead. He's like the hero of the thing. We start with him, end with him. But Chris happened to be, friends with the person that we were leasing our office from at the time at the front. So we would always run into him. And I remember when we were, kind of writing and putting together some of the beginning creative, we're like, I think Chris would look good at this part. He just has that like marble man kind of look. And he did, and he killed it. And that's one thing too about friends and family is like, oftentimes, like, they're just so much easier to work with because they don't know. So they're just trusting, like, all right, they're going to tell me what to do or what not to do. So they're not overthinking it versus sometimes on the talent side, if you're working with a talent agency and it's someone who's a little bit more green, like they're so much more like, what do I do? Where do I put my hands? Like, are you telling me everything I need to do? Like so much more in their own head sometimes I've found. So I think friends and family is great. And again, we've now at this point, I've learned to work with all types of talent and to be able to hone and get what we need out of them. But a lot of friends and family on this one.
Our art director, we had never worked with before.
I
think this is the only project we ever worked with her because I think she then got out of the industry.
She was great though.
She was fantastic. I think, so Chris was friends and family. Lizanne was friends and family. I want to say Roderick was. He was hired. And then obviously the talent that was in the factory was just talent that was just kind of working that particular day. So kind of friends and family, and then I would say the other thing to kind of point out is, we pulled a lot of favors. Like typically, if anyone's not aware, like we would work within a 10-hour window for a production day. That would be 10 hours. You clock in and then 10 hours later you're done, or you go into overtime. For a lot of this stuff, we wanted to shoot it early morning and then, sunset, and then into the night. And so we actually had a number of days there where, the whole crew was like, hey, we're cool to take like a 5-hour break in the middle of the day. And so we were there at, 4:30 or 5 a.m. for sunrise, shot sunrise, and then at about 10 a.m. when things weren't looking that great and we couldn't shoot anything because it was a lot of it exteriors. We chilled. We went and grabbed like an extended lunch. People put up hammocks in the grip truck and we were kind of just hanging out. And, then at about 4:00, we were like, all right, cool. Let's go ahead and get ready for this sunset shot and fire scene. / night. And so, people were very flexible in that. I think it's because we had a lot of buy-in from people that were like, hey, we want to do something great. And, we haven't been doing this a lot. We're trying to establish ourselves. And so, fortunately, talent was super accommodating to that. They were cool, like, and then on the location side of stuff, yeah, like locations again was kind of like pulling some favors. The barn was that producer had found the barn. We found out that there's actually horses there. Then a whole scene was kind of created out of that, right? On set was like, hey, like could we use these horses? They're like, yeah. We're like, what could we use them for? Like, well, you could drag a log out of the woods with it. We're like, that's perfect. All right. Yeah. So that's kind of how that kind of came to be in that whole scene. And so that was interesting. The house with the swimming pool and, the homeowner was one of the houses that my dad was in the process of selling. He's a real estate agent. And so it was like kind of like a new construction house that, was in the process of, being sold. And so we kind of had a window where it was like, cool, we can come in and utilize this house for a lot of these different scenes, just put ferny pads down, don't scratch the floors, and clean up after yourselves, and you're good to go. And so we had a grilling scene, we had a pool scene, we had the trimmer scene in the backyard. Then we had like the girl waking up in the morning. We had the kitchen scene with the groceries. Like a lot, we got like 4 different scenes out of that particular location, and that was a free location. And so I think a lot of that stuff was again like very scrappy for this production.
Yeah. How did you guys get all of the like product? Did you tell STIHL like, hey, we're going to need some trimmers and stuff?
So as much as we had buy-in from crew, like Matt was saying, I think we had someone that we had worked with and had sort of earned the right and just had established trust.
Yeah. And she was on the same, she was awesome.
She was really good. So we had buy-in from her. So she was just kind of like, whatever you guys need to make this great, let me know.
Yeah. And she kind of came up with the initial bones of the concept,
Yeah, she did.
And so we were just able to take that and then kind of like, again, kind of collaborate with her and kind of build out and flesh that out to what it would actually be. But the bones were there, the creative was there, and then she wanted to do great stuff too. She was highly creative, and so that's also a benefit of like working with someone who is a true creative in their own right, and then they want to do something fantastic as well. They don't want to do a factory update video, although that's great and it has its place, but she desired to do something really creative and like do something awesome. And so that's a massive, like this project would be nowhere, it'd be dead in the water without that kind of a buy-in. So to answer your question, it's kind of answering it with the point person who we were working with, who worked at STIHL, she was fantastic, and that's who kind of gave the lifeblood to this thing to make it happen. Yeah. So a lot of the products and stuff like that were sourced through her, kind of coordinating that stuff and some of those logistics, and then she was able to help on the knowledge base of like what you can and can't do with some of the products, from a legal standpoint, from a safety standpoint, how it would be used. Would you use this trimmer in this scenario? No, it has to be on like on a hill. Okay, let's go find a hill. Cool. There's one at STIHL going near this lake, and so you'd use a trimmer here instead of using a lawnmower, because a lawnmower would be dangerous because it's on too steep of a grade. So there's all these like little small nuanced things. It's a STIHL truck and a STIHL trailer, and so we were able to kind of like then build that out and put stuff on there. And so there's just a lot of stuff, and again, that kind of all stems back from having a person, your client, having buy-in and being like, hey, I believe in this as well, and so let's take a chance and go for it. So
Yeah. So I think too, sort of going back, so we kind of talked about the contractors and those people who are involved and, how it was sort of possible to pull it off. But you had initially said, STIHL had reached out to us and said, hey, we want to update our factory video, like our factory tour video. And we did have sort of like that, like, start of a concept of like, hey, can we make it a little bit more than this or make it more interesting? I think. And we were like, yeah, we can make this way more interesting. So looking back at the video now, I certainly feel like it's dated for us in terms of what we would be able to pull off now. Like, I think we'd be able to, kill a V2 of this and it would be like really, really good. But one thing that I do feel like really stands the test of time still is the story. And I think it's important to note that we kind of started there. And again, I was sort of DP directing, you were sort of DP directing. We were just sort of figuring things out and going with our gut on a lot of stuff. But now sort of looking back I can see the beginning stages, and I edited all of this too. So I think that's like an important distinction. I was a lot more of an editor mind back then than I was a director and certainly a DP.
Yeah.
And so I was just like, hey, here's what we need for the edit. Here's what I know is going to make a great edit. Here's what I know I'm going to use and not use. And that's kind of how I was approaching it from that standpoint. But from the story, we kind of, like you mentioned, there's all these nuances of how you can use the product, but I think we wanted to really highlight, like, okay, so we want to humanize STIHL as a brand. How do we do that? We kind of came up with like, okay, like this is the STIHL way, right? Like that, like, you know, the ethos that someone
100 years.
Yes.
You know, we invented the chainsaw,
heritage
yeah.
of it, and the ethos that anyone who, you know, works at STIHL, is a professional, you know, in that environment, is a homeowner in that environment. Like every single person, you know, the dealer, the you know, warehouse, you know, people, the people who are making the chainsaws, and the products, like everyone, like, I feel like that was sort of our true north, right? Like, was how do we make all these people the hero in this journey that we're going to take them on in this video? And that STIHL is sort of the guide throughout. And
STIHL
sort of
is
true north.
STIHL is not the hero.
Right.
They are the trusted guide getting these people, these heroes, to their desired results.
Yeah.
You know?
So I think when we put that, you know, sort of as like our marker and true north, that's how we sort of like fit in the story, you know, of like, all right, we're going to have, you know, a, you know, farmer, we're going to have a homeowner, we're going to have a dealer, we're going to have, you know, the servicing aspect of the dealer, which actually I'm now remembering was sort of, we chased that
The
when
mechanic.
we got there. Yeah, the mechanic. We are going to have landscaper. And then we're going to have, you know, the actual like people making the product, and how do all of their paths sort of cross, and that I feel like still does come across. Yeah. And then another thing that you were always like really good about and still good about, that all sort of get lost in the weeds sometimes, is like the payoff. And like there has to be, it can't just be, hey, they're using the equipment. It's like there's got to be a reason they're using the equipment. There's got to be some sort of like payoff that this guide solves and helps the hero on their journey, you know? So for the farmer, you know, it can't just be him using the equipment. That's the money shot, right? Of him, like, you know, and you have the, you know, sawdust and wood chips and stuff flying back. Okay. But like, why?
Right.
Why? So maybe talk about like, in your thinking, why the payoff is so important, not just in this video, but just in general, as we approach content, you know, be it a commercial, be it a product, be it a brand video. Yeah. Why is that important in the story? Yeah.
Well, I think taking this one specifically, that the reason why the payoff is so important is because if there isn't a payoff, then what's the point of the hero's journey? You know, and I think that's what it comes back to. There has to be a desired outcome that this hero is even, there's even a story for this. You know, you take Star Wars, for instance, and it's like, well, why is Luke wanting to become a Jedi? What's at stake? What's the stake? What could happen and what couldn't? What's the desired result? Well, you know, what could happen is, you know, the evil guys could take over the whole galaxy. You know, okay, well, that's why he needs to become a Jedi. And so there's stakes, there's things that are at play here, and so if there's not a payoff, then there's no purpose to the actual story. And so taking that back to like, all right, well, let's figure out what the payoff would be for a homeowner, what would be the payoff for an employee at STIHL, for a dealer, et cetera, et cetera. And there's some unique things with that you know, play into that. You know, like one of the uniques with STIHL as a brand, and this is something that, like, if you are working with a brand or an agency, like, you know, finding out what the unique things are about that company, and then also figuring out how to weave those in. So with STIHL, you know, you won't ever find them in a Home Depot and a Lowe's and a big box store. That's because their entire sales model is based upon servicing dealers. And that's a huge deal, and like, people wouldn't really kind of maybe put two and two together. But if you think about it, like, the only time you see STIHL products is at small or mid-sized servicing dealers, like a Tail It Do-It-Yourself Center, an Ace Hardware, you know, Landing Coats, some places where they specialize in that stuff. And it's because part of STIHL's product and a part of their outlook on stuff is you need to be able to take it in and be able to have someone service it and know what they're talking about, not just buy something at a big box store and then when it breaks, there's no parts, you got to fix it yourself or figure it out. Like their whole mantra and their whole, ethos and DNA is like stemmed around their servicing dealers. And then on top of that, like their quality is like, top notch. And so they don't skimp on quality, and that's kind of what they're known for. And that's why they're one of the leading brands out there, if not the leading brand in outdoor power equipment. So yeah, I think that kind of comes out in the factory side of things, when we're talking about the payoff in the factory, some of the facts that make it in and how we even put some of those things in there and we're able to weave in some of those facts. It all comes back to what the payoff is, and the payoff part of that is attached to the brand and what their DNA is. The payoff is a servicing dealer being able to service a product and then get it back out there in the hands of the people that are using it, and it's working better than what it was before. And that's the reason why it lasts. That's why the reason why you'll see chainsaws from the 80s still out there being used is because you have a solid servicing dealer. And so that's a payoff. A homeowner, they're able to get there and play with their kids and grill out because they're able to kind of have a product that works and it doesn't break down on them. And so all of those things are kind of payoffs leading back to the main story, and everybody's storylines coming together. It was tricky kind of putting all of those storylines together and making sure they all made sense and not
and you're
harping on too
bopping
much.
back and forth and weaving them and, having to keep track of like, all right, where is this person at in their journey and so forth. And I think even as it comes to the edit, that's a 4-minute video that we just watched. It doesn't feel like it, at least to me.
Right.
I think a large part of that is in the pacing of the edit, keeping things interesting. We're not hanging on a scene for too long. And I think that's even like a pro tip. You can make something like elevate production value on something, even in the edit, even if the production value is not there, by, the longer you're hanging on a shot where there's not production value is the longer that shot cheapens.
It's similar to like, your most expensive shots are your wide shots.
Sure.
It's like similar. So it's like, all right, well then just shoot everything tighter and it's going to feel more high class. Don't shoot as wide because the wider you are, the bigger the lights you have to have, the more set design you have to have, the more actors you have to have fill the space to make it feel. So just shoot it tighter. It's kind of similar with like editing. Like make it shorter, make it quicker, don't hang on stuff, and it'll make it feel like it's moving better, has more energy, and it feels more high class.
Yeah.
But talk to me about like on the editing side of stuff and like your inspiration on it, because this is definitely like, I would say that this is like kind of our style of cutting.
Yeah. This is definitely my style of cutting, and it comes from at least where I like really like picked up on it is like Aronofsky's style of directing and cutting is, like it's called like a hip hop, sequence or hip hop montage. And it's just really, really fast cuts put together that sort of feel like, almost like, like something's flashing before your eyes, but like you're intaking a lot of information in that. And it's just, in my opinion, like a unique way to stitch together story, to stitch together time. It keeps things moving fast. It keeps things interesting, so it's not like we're just approaching like, all right, and which we have to do, like when we're doing more like traditional just product videos and stuff, like, all right, they're pulling out the trimmer, they're setting it down, they're doing a clean sweep, or they're taking out the chainsaw, they're setting it down.
It's also because we know we're going to have text on screen and it needs to be on screen.
There's a purpose for that.
Yeah,
there's a purpose for that. But when it comes to this stuff, my style is certainly like, I want to like leave the viewer feeling like, oh, I was just on a ride and I kind of missed what was happening, but it just felt like really cool. You saw, crankshafts happening and then flames pop up and then, the camera, wipes into the next shot. And, we
always say with an entire video project, and this kind of goes back to what you're saying with even down to each shot, but we always say like, we want to leave people wanting more versus like, okay, I intaked all of that. Like you want people to want more, not out of the, not just out of the entire video. Like we want the video to end and people to be like, oh, I want more of that.
Yeah.
But each shot is kind of like you got just enough to want to see even more of that shot. That's exactly where we want to leave kind of our viewers, I think.
Yeah. And I think on this one, you can definitely see, to your point, that we were shooting a lot tighter, to hide stuff. And, again, yeah, like cutting in that way is a lot more forgiving on the stuff that you don't have working for you on set, I would say. So if you're cutting slower and, that's sort of where your creative's going, just know that like, okay, like my set better be on point. My shots better be like on point, and, I'm really painting a frame here. And I would say that's the difference, is you can be a lot more forgiving on the frames that you're painting if it's just you're stringing together this sequence and this feeling and this emotion that you're creating and this like journey that you're sort of riding on, versus like, now we're hanging here. And again, you can see the shots that we do hang on that are intentional are establishing shots of, sunrise out on the farm, open, guy walking out. Like that works, ending shot, him by himself solo with the barn in the background, stoking the fire. That works. That looks great. It looks, pretty.
Yeah. Cutting fast the whole way through doesn't work.
No.
Just got to have pace. It has to kind of build. And you'll see like in different parts of that, like I think you purposely cut it to where it's like, all right, let's let this portion of it breathe. A slow motion shot of the product, right? Like let that breathe for a second. Now let's get back into the quick cutting and kind of get through to the next spot that we want to like bring some attention to and pace it. So it's like almost like a mountaintop valley, mountaintop valley, mountaintop valley, valley to end it and land the plane.
Yeah.
Is kind of, I think the style with that. But let's talk about like color for a minute. Like I think when we shot this project, like certainly me and you were not the best of shooters in terms of like
color temp and I mean we're dealing with a factory, number one, and like even how to get the most out of the sensor and exposing things right and across the board and keeping the look the same throughout.
So we actually sent this out for color.
We did.
And this is somebody that we were familiar with from being in the nonprofit world, who, was a part of another nonprofit in a roundabout way. And so it was out in Australia, of all places. And so, talk to me about that quick workflow process. We don't go crazy deep in it, but like kind of what that workflow kind of looked like.
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't anything, unlike what we would do today, but, I don't want to get in the technical workflow side of it, but I would just say the biggest thing is like the color elevated it a lot and mattered. And we learned a lot from that. And, he was able to create a look of uniformity across the board that didn't exist prior to us sending out. And while we were, in the process of like, trying our best to get it to look the way that we wanted. And again, color is still something that, on any project of this size, we're sending out, to this day. And so I would just say the biggest thing was, learning on like the time zone side of things. Like you're working with someone in Australia. So it's kind of like almost like, sending something via carrier pigeon. Like, all right, this thing that I'm sending out, I know I'm not going to receive back for another, 72 plus hours. From that standpoint. And then I would say just learning, this one definitely taught me like, something, called picture lock, where it's like, we don't color something until we have picture lock from client. And so you kind of get it most of the way there.
What that means, picture lock, is like nothing with the visuals is going to change. The VO can change, the audio bed can change, but like we are locked on what the picture is, you know, and so that's 100% approved.
Yeah. So working for the colorist, we were able to share sort of, like some inspiration that we had. He was able to sort of, work with our footage to get it to be that sort of,
and our budget.
Yeah. And our budget. To get it to be at the grade that we wanted, at the exposure that we wanted, to feel a little bit darker, to have a little bit of that grain in it. And yeah, again, it sort of paved the way, for, our aesthetic, I feel like, and what we like and what we lean towards. I feel like we're always, make it darker, make it darker, make it darker. So, and this honestly still doesn't even feel like I'm on some of the shots. I'm like, make it darker. But yeah, so I think that on the color side of things, but then I also think, probably even more importantly is the sound design and the custom music. We worked with an artist here a contact that we had who's like, he did us a complete solid on this one.
Yeah.
And, worked with our budget, worked with our, the usage rights that we needed to get cleared and all of that. And, he has worked with amazing brands, so him to be able to do this for us and work with us and put in his own sweat equity on getting things right for us.
Hummel.
Dave Hummel. Yeah. Hats off to him.
Hit up Dave Hummel if you guys need good sound design and music. I think this was like we sent our inspiration of like, hey, this is the music that we kind of want to like closely imitate. And I think he brought like actual band, like live musicians in. And so this was like a full on, like, this wasn't like a computer generated,
Yeah. And what was cool on the back and forth was like the how precise I was able to be. Like, hey, I want it to build here and I want it to, do this. And I want these instruments to drop out and something that you can't get, necessarily even just with stems, that, like you can't change, you end up having to Frankenstein stuff a bit on, if you're using a music library. That was great. And I feel like, it gives it its own unique feeling. Like it doesn't feel like, oh, this is clearly from a canned,
and then with sound effects or sound design, we never want that stuff to like be like on the nose or like very in your face when you hear a sound effect of a door closing or people walking. So we're always like, hey, let's keep it pretty minimal. And I think Dave nailed it on this as well. And so, hats off. But the tried and true saying of like, half of video is audio is very true. If you have cheap feeling audio, like the whole project feels cheap. And so,
and we have other awesome vendors too that we use for, sound design as well and color. Like, and I think that's important. And we'll probably talk about it next episode, but just having like a lot of different, because some people work great for one project and then others work great for another project. And so having, the right people to be able to collaborate with. And sometimes people are like, hey, we're too busy to take this on right now, or we can't do this. So you need to have, you not put all your eggs in one basket, from that standpoint. But and I think too, just, with the story, we sort of had our true north. Like I think I wrote most of the copy, and then their director of marketing, who's also great as well and has, a real keen understanding on STIHL's voice. I feel like sort of, tweaked a couple things to what it is now today. But I think we sort of had, our game plan, had our shot list, had everything that we knew we were going after and chasing. But I think it is important still too, and we still, do this today, is like chase. A DP told me, once, this was at this point almost a decade. A wise man once said is always chase the sun, and what he meant by that was like you are working with the biggest, source out here. Okay. That source you're not changing. So that's going to dictate what your shot is if you're just sort of run and gun chasing, different things. And, I remember showing up to a scout with him and, he found this like really nice shot with the placement of the sun, and it ended up being like this hero shot for this spot. But that always stuck with me as far as like chase the sun. Again, I think metaphorically, like, the sun can be a lot of different things, chasing different elements. But I think about the horse. I think about, the shots we were able to get with that, incorporating the horse into pulling the log, for this guy, whereas we were just going to have him, sort of cutting and then carrying and then setting up
and like
the
less on the visual, but like more broad, like not just chase the sun visually, but like
that's what I'm saying, metaphorically.
Chase what's like working, what's working. And so, another good example of like chasing what was working was like the barn was positioned where at that time of the year at the sunrise, the sun was literally at the end of the barn, straight down the double doors that opened. So as he opened the double doors, it was like right there, and so, like again, we kind of changed
and our schedule needs to reflect that. It's not like, oh, well, we're not shooting the barn until this time. It's like, nah, we're shooting things when they're working, the best. But the horses from a content standpoint would be one thing that we chased and made work. And then I think about the mechanic that was there, who was just watching. He literally came out to like see what was going on at the dealer for our dealer scene.
Like, we're gonna use you.
Yeah, and we're like, dude, you look freaking awesome. And he just, he did. He just looked the part.
Fortunately, like the back area looked cool.
Yeah,
like,
it looked really
gritty enough, but not too gritty.
Yeah.
Where like client wouldn't want that to be like scene. It was like the perfect mix of like it's a good workshop.
Yeah, so we made that work. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that we chased in that particular spot that stood out to me. Certainly areas like one of the things that I think about was like the heat treatment area wasn't supposed to be a part of the video.
Yeah.
And we scouted and we saw that big flame pop out and they're like, we don't really need to do anything for heat treat. And I'm like,
yeah, we do.
Yeah, we do. I want heat treatment, and it's just an awesome spot. And I even felt like, heat treat was like, man, we don't get much love back here. We don't see marketing here too often. So there was, I'm sure there was, this again was almost 7-8 years ago at this point that we did this, but I'm sure there's other stories that we can recall. But yeah, just chasing, what's working and not being so married to your idea. Not to just completely, change directions and switch gears and say, all right, cool. Like this is what we were doing, but now we're doing this.
Right.
I think there has to be a trust with yourself that you establish. There has to be a trust with the client. Because you sort of are taking off like, the bumpers,
This was not our first project with this client. Like we had plenty of other projects that we had proven ourselves on, that we had taken chances on, that we had, gone the extra mile on. And so, this was not our first, video or project with this client. We had plenty of other ones that we had, done. We had proven ourselves. We had done things with them. And so we kind of built up to this place of trust with this particular client.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, I think it highlighted a lot of the things that we were intuitively good at and added a lot of new things to our toolbox. And again, like you can know everything in the world in your head, but you have to continue to push the envelope to be able to add that experience under your belt and live through it and live through those days on set and be like, okay, I know next time what I'm not going to do, or I know next time that this really worked, and you got to keep putting yourself out there. And then I think, just understanding too, especially these are early years Flagship, the sweat equity that we put in, like we, I don't want to say we didn't make a dime. Like I don't know what, I can't recall at this point, but I just know that anything like we were throwing in, all of our gear and all the stuff that we were getting paid for, we're spending on, to make this great, because we knew we could make it great. And that it could really be like a flagship piece and a showpiece for us and for STIHL and for our reputation. I think it elevated us from like, oh, those are the video guys to like, whoa, like it was, certainly on like the executive level, like an out of left field, like, it ended up being, so they have an annual, like, I don't know if you want to call it a conference or like a meetup or whatever with all the dealers. When they played the video there, it got a standing ovation.
I think that like tapped into like everyone feeling like, hey, I'm proud to be a part of this company, this brand. And I think that's kind of what it tapped into.
Yeah, well, that was just proof of the story.
Yeah.
Right? Like that was what the story was. So it's like as you're watching it, especially being in, the STIHL family, whether you're a dealer, distributor, employee, making the chainsaws, whatever, you do feel sort of like this proud, like this pride to be a part of this heritage and like, man, I'm a part of this story too. And so, I think it's just a testament.
I think at that time it was very unique and, very early days and something new for the brand. Obviously it's been redone even as of more of late and stuff like that. And so,
and we're pretty used to this formula now. At this time when we made this formula was still like early stages of brand film, like just talking about across the board, just that organic feeling. So, but I think that, it was worth the risk for sure. And it paid off for us. And we knew that. We knew, even if they hated it, which they didn't, thankfully, that we could always, like you said, revert back to, what the original scope was, and that it would just be, more like sweat equity on our end to make it, what it needs to be. So, any other thoughts onto, obviously, another thing too, I'll add is not only did they love it, but I think we've said it at this point, but then it became, a national commercial. Just again, a testament to, if you take risks, this was supposed to be an internal only video. We took the risks. We, sort of put our necks out there to some degree, put in the sweat equity, put in the hard work, believed in ourselves, worked with the people to be able to facilitate it, and brought in the right people to make it happen, people that were hungry to make it great. And, the feather in our cap was it turned into a national commercial.
Do you guys think you would have made the spot, taking the risks, if you hadn't had that pre-existing relationship with the client and with your point person and stuff like that? Like,
I don't think
that
so.
Played a big part in it?
Yeah, I think, like I said before, I think the biggest thing that could be taken for granted or overlooked was how crucial our point person was. Like, she was a creative in her own right, like we said before, and that's what gave us the confidence to be able to take a risk, is because we had kind of taken smaller risks along the way with calculated creative risks along the way leading up to this, which gave us like, okay, like if she thinks that we could go for it, we're going to go for it. Like, we wouldn't take a brand new client with no track record and no trust being built, just be like, all right, I know what you want. Let's make something completely different. There would have been too many blockades there for us to be able to do so,
Yeah, she was definitely our cheerleader, and, definitely saw like, you always say, like, you can't be a hero in your hometown, but saw like, these guys are more than just, guys with a camera. And so, I don't think that, I do think that there are some things that we calculate now as a company where we're like, okay, like, are we going to take a risk? But we also calculate like, the risk is they may never use us again if this is our first experience or whatever, or we can totally nail it and knock it out of the park. So it was a risk, but not one that we couldn't recover from. And
there's a lot that could have gone wrong for sure. Think about, like, we learned our lesson on driving around truck and trailer, had a little bit of a close call there, which, was funny after the fact, but
or not being, like, I think of, like, commercials that we're on now where we have like a true, locations person who knows what they're doing and comes, with their, 50 pieces of, cardboard to like lay throughout the house and has everything like set up properly, and
corners of the walls and all kinds of stuff.
I think about that, that we were, in a listing that your dad had, with 15, 20 people, and we're not paying attention to location, we're paying attention to the video. And
I mean, we were being careful to some extent, but we had tennis balls.
But I'm saying,
on
like,
everything.
we got lucky, that something didn't happen.
But again, I mean, that's still a testament to, like, the crew was fantastic. Like, it wasn't just like Jeannie came in and just started putting up stands everywhere. They had tennis balls and fernies to kind of protect different things here and there, but it's certainly, we didn't have a locations person like, it should be done,
So but so any final takeaways? This is still one of your favorite projects, isn't it? Me and you always fight about, like, when we're sending examples like this, and I'm always like, feels a little dated. I'd like to change a lot of things. Like I said, it feels a bit like a macaroni project to me at times, even though I know it's great. But maybe that's just the self-consciousness in me of knowing what we could make it if we had a shot. If we had a shot again. One more shot at the title.
I think it's kind of like writing your first essay. Right? You're like, dude, that was like a really good essay. I'm still really proud of it. The bones are still there. Some misspellings in there. I think I could have formed that sentence a little bit better. But it still feels like that was my first, like, actual, like, essay or chapter of a novel or a mini novel.
And we've had the opportunity to do other similar-ish stuff, not at the scale that we did, but similar-ish stuff with STIHL in particular, and then other brands too.
Yeah.
But yeah, thanks for watching. If you liked what you watched, check us out every other Wednesday. Subscribe to the channel, like the video, comment if you want some content or need some questions answered. We're happy to do so. Thanks so much for tuning in to the Flagship Visuals podcast. We will catch you next time.